Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Before we hear from our speaker today, it's our tradition to go around the room and say our names. If I may all begin, my name is Roy.
Jason.
Stuart.
Tom.
I'm Shantan.
Silas.
Kim.
I'm David.
Don.
Jen.
Jeff.
My name is Ray.
Matthew.
Larry.
I'm Ed.
Francisco.
Jack. Harley.
I'm Brad.
Dennis.
David.
Paul.
Peter.
Risha. Tim.
John.
My name is Joe.
Jay.
My name is Mary Media.
Sister Mary Peter.
Thank you. Sister Mary Peter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence found her voice through the Radical Faeries in 1987 and served as a missionary in Toronto before moving to San Francisco in 1999. Her lifelong activism focuses on HIV-AIDS, queer youth, civil rights, and social justice. Her efforts include partnerships to provide street-level health services to sex workers, legal aid for LGBTQ refugees, and resistance to police violence. She's a poet, writer, and former sex worker. As an ordained minister, she joined the fight for equal marriage in San Francisco in 2004 and regularly performs wedding ceremonies. She lives on the coast with her husband of 18 years. You can reach her directly via email at marypeter@thesisters.org. Welcome, sister.
Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for having me back, everybody. You're a very tolerant Sangha. 2 strikes, I'm still not out, so we'll see if we get to 3. I'm really very humbled to be back with you today. Thank you to Jeff and the folks that invited me back. It was a real privilege to be with sisters here and just share Dharma with you. And I asked Mary Media, who's a member of your Sangha, to be with me because in a lot of ways I'm here because of her faithfulness over almost 40 years of being a sister and a practicing Buddhist, and also a nun who's not in the room, Sister Loganberry Frost, that I lovingly call Sister Logananda, who studied with Maharishi Mahishi Yoga in the 60s and brought TM into the sisterhood. So I think a lot of people don't know, in our first convent for over a decade, people regularly meditated in mindfulness together. We've lost the practice. I think the impact is there in our choice of accessories, but we're coming back to it. When I thought about today, what really came to me after our last conversation was the idea of the passionate Buddhist, which may seem like an oxymoron for some people who talk about, checking feelings and getting to a place of complete equanimity. But the more I thought about it and meditated on it, the more it made sense, especially for this Sangha, a gay Buddhist fellowship, and in this moment. And Mary Media has said you've spoken a little bit about the tumult since the election and how you're all doing, but I'd like to have a conversation about that with you today and just check in. Because what I really want to talk about today is the passionate Buddhist thriving in an age of hashtags. And it seems a little counterintuitive, but let's share and see if we can get somewhere together. Is that okay with all of you?
Yes.
So the first thing I just want to ask, an open question. So how you doing since Inauguration Day? Have you noticed any changes? Not well. Say a little bit more about that.
I feel it is the most penetrating threat to my equanimity I've ever experienced politically in this country as an American.
Powerful, thank you. Anybody else? If they're Republicans, don't be in the closet. It's okay to come out too. anything particular you want to talk about where you think, gosh, that experience wouldn't have happened before, or is different, or I forgot about something like that?
Well, I'd just like to say that it feels like, especially this weekend, with what went on yesterday, that since January, sort of the fear that we have had of this being a proto-fascist regime seems to be playing itself out. I mean, it seems that as time goes on, we get closer and closer to the elements of German fascism, and they're becoming more normalized in this country. And so it feels, in the moment, that our fears are being realized. That's what is going on for me today.
Mm-hmm. I'll speak to something very personally. Someone rode by in a truck the other day and called me a fucking faggot. That hasn't happened to me in ages, not in the middle of the Castro. And I felt something, and then I paused and I thought, who are you? And I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking, who are you? Do you live in the Castro? Are you someone who feels marginalized in the Castro? Were you just passing by? Did you choose this moment in this street corner because that was your target? Because you'd read about it online and knew the history? What was happening? And I kind of, the bigger existential threat was I was crossing without paying attention and almost got hit. But I spent the whole rest of the afternoon trying to figure out what happened there. And I think a lot of us are feeling that. A lot of us are trying to unpack a shift in consciousness and a shift in the way we relate to the world and the world relates to us, and even deeper, how we anticipate the world is reacting to us and seeing us, even without direct evidence, but just there's something in the air that has changed. The zeitgeist is definitely different. I think everybody can agree on that. And in what I want to speak about today, I'm going to draw on the work of Robert Wright. I don't know if that name rings a bell. In the 90s, he put out a book called The Evolution of God, and right about the same time, something called The Moral Animal. He's a visiting scholar right now at Union Theological Seminary in New York. He's just written a new book called Why Buddhism is True. I thought I should just buy copies of the book and then we'll save an hour. But he takes Darwinism and Buddhism and looks at them together and brings in cognitive therapy and talks about how somehow the Buddha anticipated a growing awareness of how our minds work and how we shape culture, and how particularly mindfulness meditation, the work you're doing, is a liberating tool perfect for this moment in time, when tribalism and fear and anger and reaction are kind of shaping the culture again and shaping our thoughts. So, in starting the conversation, what I want to talk about is dukkha, right? Suffering, with Buddha's very first sermon, where he described the world as suffering, and then unfolded the Four Noble Truths and said, well, suffering is caused by attachment, and our goal is to be released from attachment, and there is a path to that. And mindfulness is a way of doing that. It's a perfectly good translation, the word suffering. But there's another way of understanding that Sanskrit word that says unsatisfactoriness or dissatisfaction. And this is where Robert Wright was really helpful to me in trying to unpack that kid in the truck. It's the idea that in evolution itself, we are built to always be unsatisfied. That the primary urge of evolution is for us to continually seek satisfaction. And the way he talks about it is if you had sex once and it was amazingly blissful and you were completely satisfied. If that state of satisfaction was fixed, that would have been the end of the human race, right there. So there's a biological imperative to always try to be more happy. And then there's a biological imperative for always failing. It propels the species forward. But I think what's really interesting about the work he's doing now and why Buddhism is true is he's kind of going to cognitive behavioral therapy, he's going to neuroscience and saying, that wiring was for a different time, right? When I was going to come out of the cave and get eaten, or the neighboring cave guy was going to come over and club me and take my woman, or my mastodon leg, or whatever it was I was holding on in my cave.
My twink.
My twink. Yeah. Sister, that's a little too much truth before noon. But he says, the idea of Buddhism saying not to run away from feeling, not to diminish or extinguish feeling, but to create space to sit with a feeling, to find a little bit of space, not to just be impulsive about a feeling. That's the liberation for this age. And I really thought about that, and it's true what he says. A lot of our emotional impulses that we make manifest from the feelings that we have autonomically, if you think about them, they're counterproductive, or often totally the opposite of what we need. If that boy in the truck yelling, "fucking faggot" at me, my emotion was, I hate you. My impulse was to run after the truck and beat him senseless. Productive? No, thank you, Ed. Probably a little counterintuitive. You may have had 3 or 4 friends in there who were hoping I was going to do that. I didn't really have a sister posse backup behind me. Unhelpful. Stopping for a moment and taking a deep breath and getting to a place of, what did that just trigger in me? Wait a minute now. Running in this, unhelpful. Let me try to empathize and understand. And there's been a lot of this since the election of trying to really put our shoes in the feet of the Trump voter, understand all of that. Maybe helpful, maybe not. I don't know. I think chasing after those folks with a liberal agenda will never change anything politically. Understanding those emotional responses and the triggers that set them off, and then having enough self-awareness to come into mindfulness and say, those are my emotions too, and my feelings, and what are my triggers? Very helpful. In the same way, on college campuses, particularly right now, the safe space concept, anybody familiar with that? You don't have a right, professor or lecturer or administrator, to say or think or feel certain things. Makes me unsafe, it triggers me. Can't have that here. Happens in our own community. 3 times this year we've tried, many of us who are in the organizing community, to launch protest marches about Trump. All of those efforts have fallen apart because we get to a point in the dialogue where there are so many of us speaking, we're triggering one another. So some word I use triggers you. Some destination I want to have the march in is unsafe for you. Fuck all of you. Rage. We never get the protest off. And then Donald Trump and his people are smart and they go, we're going to do this awful thing. No, we're not. We're going to do this terrible thing. No, we're not. Oh, we did it on Friday. Drives you crazy trying to keep up. When do you go to the street? Well, what day are you supposed to be out there? And then you're out there and you're in the middle of the march and 5 more things come down that you didn't even see coming. They're not stupid. And this world in which we're living is really the Buddha's nightmare, writ large. It is nothing but a culture-triggering autonomic emotional response that goes back to the cave on all sides. On the left, we're using it to fundraise. We're using it to get people into the streets. We're using it to build rage. On the right, we're just reinforcing the samsara of the lie. And Donald Trump, I think, is the perfect antithesis to the Buddha. He is advertising with no moral compass. If you think about it, he is Facebook and Google and Madison Avenue and the sex trade and consumerism all packaged into one big orange blimp. And when he says something horrible and completely outrageously false, and 5 seconds later says the exact opposite, and then a week later says, well, like I've always said, what's going on there? That's an appeal to what I call the micromind. That's the same thing that Facebook and Grindr and Amazon are triggering in us all the time. We have a technology programmed to hit that autonomic response, to make us feel something in the moment, to trigger something, and then to grasp, to do something that's going to sate whatever that was for a moment. And then the next trigger, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. And pretty soon you're just a chain of micromind moments. And where did you go? Where did you go? You're gone. I'm gone. I've done nothing but like things and dislike things and send messages and tweet other things. And honestly, my life, if I'm not mindful, is being led between one hashtag to the next executive order, to the next protest, to the next hashtag. Hashtag resist. Right? How many times have I tweeted that out and sent it out on Facebook? Nothing wrong with that. We have to be in the streets. We must be motivated. But when I thought about the work of Robert Wright, I thought about coming to this Sangha today. This Sangha in particular, a gay Buddhist fellowship. Those three words together and separately have really made me who I am. I wanted to offer a new hashtag. Hashtag flow. Hashtag flow. Like the Buddha's comment about the stream and watching the leaf fall in the stream and being at peace. I think it's important in this moment to go deeper and to remember that we live in a cycle that is richer than the one that is being pushed through our phones and our laptops and our news channels. And to remember that it's accessible to us at all moments, because it's really the truth of who we are and how we live. And if there's Buddhist practice, you are the key to our cultural and social liberation, because you already have the tool. Mindfulness, a practice, going deeper, having just the breath that gives you enough detachment to see the feeling. How many of you, since all of this has started, have felt a little awkward as Buddhists because the rep we have is, well, you're kind of removed. You're the quiet people. Buddhists don't lead protest marches, do they? That's bullshit. Buddhists are the people who hold all emotions as equal and then assess them. And then choose to work with the emotion in a place of freedom where they can accomplish something greater, which is the liberation of yourself and of the people around you. One of the first critics in the New York Times for Robert Wright's book said this is all a wonderful construct. The idea that, our emotions are captured right now and that we have meditation to kind of get through it and there's a way of doing this. But how are you going to get all these individuals meditating to create cultural change? Not going to work. Tough to upscale. Maybe that's true. Any revolutionary movement is tough to upscale. It's tough to get 30 queer people to the right street corner at the right time with signs, or to have enough people run for office. But if you think about hashtag flow, being a passionate Buddhist, this is your moment to shine in this culture. Because look what you're doing right here on this Sunday morning. I'm not talking to one person. I'm talking to a Sangha. This idea of community is central to Buddhist practice. My mindfulness is not my selfish gift. My mindfulness is building a community of people who are aware And we live in the world, and we have things to accomplish today. And it is a better world that we are making. Because we are saying we're better than simply being reactive. We're better than simply doing something out of impulse. We're thoughtful about it. We take a longer perspective. And as we feel the emotion, we honor it. But we think, well, what is the consequence of that? More suffering? More unsatisfactoriness? Haven't I had this feeling before? Friday night on my grinder, that guy looks really good. Didn't show up. Go again, go again, go again, go again. Okay, you came. Fine. Let's just, 15 minutes later. On grinder again. Right? That's the hardwire of that impulse culture. But you wouldn't be here on a Sunday morning if you aren't already working through that together. And if you didn't know how to support one another. I look around this room, a lot of you guys have been in San Francisco a long time. You've been through worse moments. The AIDS crisis, Anita Bryant, the Night Initiative, the major Bible belters and the big churches in Sacramento coming in to protest on our streets. It's not like any of this is new. They may have refined their tools. They may be much better at broadcasting 24/7 and have the tools to do that on a much bigger scale. It's not like none of us have had this experience before. Even if we weren't here, even if we were in just some small town trying to come out as ourselves, or identify as gender fluid, or just be something different. We all know this trope. So one of the really encouraging things for me about coming back to you today was just to say, I do have hope as a sister and as a queer person and as someone who practices, that the solution is already manifest in you. And that if we go deeper into the practice and understand it's not just suffering, it's this unsatisfactoriness, this desire to always be in that state. If we just sink deeper into the practice, adhere to it more, and then use that to build and strengthen community, use that to lead us into right action. Buddhism doesn't say be inactive. The Buddha didn't spend his whole career under the Bodhi tree going, this is fabulous. Right? He went out to teach. He went out to build. He went out way beyond his comfort zone to cultures where his language and their language, you had to have translators. That's Buddhism. That outward propulsion for right action based on enlightened passions, genuine emotions that seek for the betterment of all of us. So it's been rough since last November for me. I've been more active as a sister than I have been since the 90s. It's hard at 52 to realize I can do as many protests, but I have to build in a nap before and recovery time after. That's insulting. I sweat. I have flop sweats because I'm an older guy. I never had that in my 20s. Very humbling. But the energy inside me that gets me to the street or gets me to that rally or has me calling that person is the same. And it's propelled by daily practice, daily faithfulness. And if I didn't do that when that kid came across, it would have just crumbled me. At 20, having someone come in a truck saying, fuck you, would have crumpled me. I wasn't ready for that. I was still practicing how to wield this nun thing in public and had a lot of self-doubt about that. Fast forward to just last week when this happened. Yeah, I'm okay. I feel for you. I kind of wanted him to park the truck. I would like to have had a conversation if we could have done that safely, because there was pain in that truck and there was impulse. And as we look at what's happening, there is no moral equivalency. This thing that he said yesterday about Charlottesville, the bigotry and hatred and violence on all sides, yeah, excuse me, as a Buddhist, I have to say, fuck you. That was a KKK-sponsored rally, and they did it because you empowered them to do it, because you have been triggering this hatred and fear and false narrative for over 100 and some odd days. It's on you. The woman that was killed by the car, that's on you. And the 1,000 ministers that marched silently, that's on us. That's our response. I'm going to feel all of it. It's right that I'm angry. It's right that I'm rageful. But I'm not going to express that emotion. I'm going to understand why I feel that. And it's because this is not right mind or right action. And I know what that looks like because I have been living it with my brothers and my sisters for decades. And you're an aberration of mind. You're like the snoring that happens during group meditation and takes me off for a minute. And I'm like, really, are you sleeping? And then I'm like, yeah, you are. Okay, back. Or the gurgling in my stomach. All right. There'll be time for the tuna salad later. Stay in the practice. So, living in this time of hashtags, it's important to understand that you're passionate Buddhists, that this is real for each of us, and that we have a tool already to engage. You know, sometimes people talk about Buddhists like they talk about Quakers, that you're just really nice people and you make great neighbors and it's wonderful to know you, but you know, what do you really do? And like Quakers, people forget they got that name because of the trembling that came over them after sitting silently in meeting, waiting for the Spirit of God to fill them with passion. And then what did they do? Well, they pushed the abolition movement. They pushed suffrage. They pushed civil rights. They pushed draft resisting and anti-war pacifism. They pushed economic justice because they were quiet long enough to be filled with the passion that motivated right action. And they took a long perspective and they continue to work and act. And so do you, and so do I. And we don't do it alone. We do it as a Sangha. And a lot of you were here last time when the sisters were here talking about our journeys. And one of the things I remember we talked about was the idea of the empty bowl, which is very familiar to the Buddhist. It calls you to meditation and it calls you out. I've talked about for me as a sister who lives a vowed life that the bowl for me is a crucible. It's not empty. It's where I pour everything in my life in. The good, the bad, and the ugly. The cheap accessory and the expensive bauble. All go in there. And my practice is the fire that heats the crucible. And if I'm lucky, it's going to take all of that matter and turn it into gold. Right? The magical chemist stone, the alchemizing moment. The alchemizing moment for me is when I sit with you in practice like this and I see you being faithful to yourself and to each other. And it turns that into gold. And for me, I call that gold joy. That's my vow. I take a vow to expiate stigmatic guilt and promulgate universal joy through habitual manifestation. And when we were here last time, I talked about how joy for me is very different than happiness. Happiness is that fleeting impulse. Joy is hard-won. Joy is a state of equanimity where the pain and the tragedy of my life and the unaccomplished things and the regrets are just as important to me as the celebrations and the moments of pure connection and the relationships that continue. And when I can use all of that and access all of that, I am living into my vow to be a witness to joy and to find the joy in another. And I share that I wear a mirror to honor my mother, one of the founders, Sister Mish, who has a little bit of OCD and never throws anything away. So she drove to Tennessee to found the fairy sanctuary where I found my vocation. And when she parked, the rear view mirror, or the side mirror of the bus fell off. And rather than throw it away, she thought, I could use that. And she created an accessory. So I wear it to honor the OCD mother that I have. But I also wear it because a lot of times when people see a sister, their first response, other than the ones who say, fucking faggot, are, God, you're so pretty. Oh, you look so beautiful. Or, it's so wonderful to see you. And for the literally minded, I say, well, you're just looking at a big reflection of yourself, dear. And the joy that you're too bashful to claim right now. And coming to the Sangha, I'm looking at the liberation that we have been a little too distracted to claim and to work. And you are looking back at me in the same way. And reminding me that yes, #resist, yes, #trans lives matter, yes, #Black Lives Matter. Underneath it all, yes, #flow. I have been here before, I will be here again, and other things are coming. But I have an obligation to make them manifest. And I will do that better through my practice, through walking the Dharma, through understanding my unsatisfactoriness, and by doing it with my brothers and my sisters. So, I had the privilege of seeing the Dalai Lama once, and he got about this point in his lecture, and he said, so, we have talked a lot. Some of this you will remember, and that is good. Work with that. The rest you will not remember. Not for you. Meh. So, I'm no Dalai Lama, but I kind of feel the same way. We've talked a lot. Some of this you'll remember. Great. Work with it. Some of this you won't. Not for you. Meh. No big deal. But I will always remember the privilege of being with you. And I will honor your faithfulness to your practice and to your brothers. And I will leave you with a little homework as a Sangha. What conversations are you having about walking this now in the community? You hold this powerful tool of liberation. How are you sharing it and introducing people to it? How are you bringing it to people who don't look like you or necessarily walk in your neighborhood or are close to you? They need it as much as anyone else, especially now. And what collective action as a Sangha are you taking to resist by demonstrating the fact that you flow in a different way and that you have right mind and understand right action? You don't have to just huddle in the quiet room. This room is a rocket ship ready to blast off and transform this community. So I leave it with you, and I offer my help and my assistance, the sisterhood, the one that's planted like a spy in your midst. But work with that a little bit. Talk to each other about it a little bit. I think you're underutilized as a tool of liberation in this community, and I'd like to see you maximize your potential as a group and as a Sangha and as a seed. So, thank you. I'm very open to a conversation. Let's have a good one.
We had a speaker some time ago who talked about being in a car with young children, and they were driving somewhere, and there was a vehicle behind them who was the driver was very upset. They weren't going fast enough, and he beeped, and he honked, and he finally got around them, and when he got around them, he flipped them off, and Pema Chodron's response was to have compassion for the guy because of what he must be really suffering if he had to do that. And I find that that reminded me of the situation that you described that happened personally to you. And I find that when single incidents like that happen to me, I find it easier to find compassion for the one or two people who I've seen right there. But when the crowd from Virginia gets to be that massive, and when the object of their scorn gets to be so big and so many people, I feel like I'm in despair when I see it that big. I can't wrap my head around it because it just seems to be so difficult. So I guess that the solution is to keep it individual and personalized, but it's hard. It's harder to see it when the focus is so many more people.
That's a very astute observation. As someone who has a 90-minute commute every day, 2 directions, that's just a chain of my day, right? Those people are behind me and in front of me and on my sides. And there's a habit I can slip into very quickly that gets me just as angry as them because they're everywhere, every day. So I hear that. Let me just offer one thing in response. This feeling of despair when you see things like, I'm never going to look at a tiki torch again the same way. That got polluted when those Nazis took tiki torches and marched through the university. Yeah, that's it. But I think the illusion that's perpetuated by the media in this is I am looking at that as an individual confronting a mob. Because it's coming to me through the radio or the television or my phone or my computer. That is disempowering and that is intentional. Because it wants you to despair. And so I just encourage you, when that happens, remember the mob is a group of disparate individuals who had enough unction to go to one place at the same time. You are fully capable of performing the same task. You don't have to wear white hoods to do it or carry tiki torches. You can just show up and be there mindfully. But I think that's an important thing that we forget a lot, because the whole wrong mind of this moment is to set you as a compassionate individual against the angry mob. So you become the Frankenstein monster. And there's only one outcome to that story. They're coming with their torches. And that's been the fear mind that I've had to fight since November. When I sat there in New York and Chelsea holding a meeting, watching the election go like this, and just thinking, I'm fucked. My nephew voted for him. As much as he loves me as a queer person, he said I have to do what's right for me and I need a tax cut. What? We haven't had a good conversation since. But I'm not giving up. And I think let's just be careful. Like, whenever we feel the despair, that's when you phone a friend. Right? That's when the sangha has to get activated. I'm not an individual looking at a mob. I am part of a collective. How are we collectively responding?
I'm a member of a gay book club, and it's been 20 years now that we've been meeting every month. And part of the conversation in our book club is all these gay books have these coming out stories, every one of them practically. You know, can't we read something that doesn't have a coming out story? But the fact of the matter is, we're all gay people and we all came out. That is a very difficult thing that we've all confronted. Mm-hmm. And when I came out, I felt like I was confronting a mob. That's a very familiar feeling, growing up in Salt Lake City as a gay boy, and telling your whole social network that you do not fit in. And that I remember sitting at the dinner table in 1965 or whatever, Martin Luther King was on television, and I said, gee, I think Martin Luther King is a great, courageous person. My father dragged me from the dinner table and spanked me and said, never say that again. So this is not an unfamiliar thing. I remember voting for Harvey Milk. This is not this is not an unusual thing for us. So I think it's important for all of us to realize that the inevitable progress of liberalism is not necessarily going to happen. Mm-hmm. It's an individual fight for every one of us.
Well, that's a powerful witness. Thank you for that. And you mentioned Harvey Milk, and one of the things I just want to remind everybody, Harvey Milk wasn't a gay politician. Harvey Milk was a retail politician. What made him famous? The poop campaign. Pick up dog poop in the parks. That's what got people to pay attention to him. And then he figured out Chinese people weren't being served in their own language. And he started to talk to people who were in labor getting persecuted by Coors. And he built those alliances. And it's right, coming out, can we ever get past that story? Like it's logo TV, like, oh geez, it's like one more cute smarmy thing, like please. But the power of it is I have survived that. 20 years of meeting with queer people since, that's something. So, okay, we have to keep telling the coming out stories. People are still coming out. Just yesterday we had a people's picnic in Dolores Park. This young man from Salinas told me his coming out story. I found myself weeping. Because the one thing he was telling in the story wasn't the part that he figured out, I'm going to be a leader in the gender fluid Latino community in the mission. That took me to kind of go, here, honey. Now he gets it. The coming out story propels us to go out. So who are you going out to, again, as a Sangha and as a person? You're not alone. Where does your despair lead you? Do you recognize it in anyone else? Talk to them. Yeah, in the back.
Well, I think it's great that you mentioned that you can phone a Sangha friend, because I'm in 12-step, and that's the practice in almost all the 12-step groups. And it's really wonderful to have that tool. I'm wondering, were you in drag when you were verbally assaulted?
I happened to be in this fabulous attire that day, yes.
Because when I came out, I was very afraid of drag. I didn't understand it, and so it somehow threatened me. I don't know why. It took me years in the gay community to accept it. It probably took me 10 or 15 years. And so I can really empathize with somebody who reacts to you when you're wearing your nun's costume. And I've been walking down Castro Street, early on, and people called me a faggot, and I was just dressed like this. So, it's just a great place for people who want to do that to go, because they know the right there. I understand that. And also, I really work hard against the fear, because fear mongers want people to be fearful. And I'm pretty stubborn, and I want to not accept that as an acceptable mode for me to be in. Of course, it does stimulate it, but through the meditation, I'm aware of it, and I can help it dissolve and turn it into something more positive, I guess. I mean, I don't run away from it. I do sit with it, and so I think that's a good thing to think of. I was thinking when you were talking is that Trump's putting out a message, and we need to put out a response. It's a communication model. He's putting out a message. What is our response? And people are just as threatened by the fact that I'm a Buddhist. In some of my family, I think as if I were a sister of indulgence. They don't get it. I've been a Buddhist for so long that now they accept it, but they have no understanding of Buddhism. Just one more thing that I thought was a riot. I remember I went to visit a friend in Reno, and I got angry and went, and I thought you were a Buddhist. I said something early on that reminded me of that, So that's it. Thanks so very much for coming and speaking.
Well, that's a lovely insight, and just one little note there for the Sangha. Yeah, Trump's putting out a message. He's putting out a diarrhea of messages, especially in the morning when he's on the shitter, right? Boom, 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 boom. That's his prime time. Responding needs to mean something different than it has for the last 100 days. I can't respond to every one of those. That's the micro mind, and that gets me caught in impulse. Doesn't matter what he says. Yesterday, transgender people can't serve. Today, we're going to dump mercury in the stream. Tomorrow, we're going to drill in Yosemite. Doesn't matter. The important thing to cultivate is it's all part of a whole cloth. So how am I going to flow underneath the beginning and out to the other side of that and undercut the bank that he is standing on until he drowns in his own melanin? Right? I have to keep sending a message that's not a response. And that's what I meant about the Sangha has some work and you're an underutilized resource. You have been consistently sending a message since you got started as a Gay Buddhist Fellowship, haven't you? It's good to come together It's good to do mindful practice. It's good to hold one another. How much more can you amplify that message now? We need to hear you. We need to see you. We need to see the effects of it. Oh, you tweet him. Make yourself be happy. I did that last night on a couple of things. I felt very gratified. But I knew I was coming here today, so I stopped and put it down. But what's your message? Not your response, your message. Get it out harder, farther, to more people.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a perfect segue to my question, I guess. But first of all, I just feel more hopeful now, having heard you speak in dialogue with you, than I have in the last 100 days. But it occurs to me that, I guess, two things. I think our country is sort of experiencing the unfolding of its own karma. You know, of the underpinnings of how we started, and you know, white supremacy going way back. But what she said also made me realize I don't think our Sangha has ever appeared in a march or a protest or a parade. I mean, we had a booth maybe once or twice at the Castro Street Fair and handed out literature. And I think actually I'm here as a result of that at some point. But we don't have a banner. We don't have T-shirts. We don't have anything by which someone would identify us or see us. Even if it's just having the name, Gay Buddhist Fellowship, and a bunch of bodies behind it. I mean, that in itself could be a huge message. So, you know, I just want to put that out there and see if maybe now is the time.
It's a wonderful insight. You know, my friends in Black Lives Matter, you know, they're like, genocide and slavery founded this country. Why are you all so surprised? Not different, just you white people are nervous now. That's truth. I got to own that. Right? I have a certain privilege, even dressed like this, because of the color of my skin. So what's been hard in San Francisco is that becomes a barrier to communication very quickly. I learned early on in one of these exchanges about the marches, Cass knows about this, I just shut up really early on and listened. And then my job was just to sort of support and amplify, because they'd had enough white guys like me trying to lead a march on transgendered rights. And it fell apart, and in the falling apart there was enough space for transgendered youth to create their own march, and it was fabulous. It really was. They took over a city hall, and it was beautiful. So, yeah, good thoughts. And then also, you know, we had a people's picnic yesterday in Dolores Park, because one of the things these experiences have made us realize is in the moment when you want to call a march or do a political action, unless you have the relationship already with the people, there's a trust issue. So relationship building, right relationship building, that's the most important activist job we have to do. It's no surprise that Trump is in the White House. Since Barry Goldwater, Republicans have been systematically creating thought centers, political action committees, training judges, educating politicians, teaching them how to run for office, creating the Fox network. I'm not saying there should be a Buddhist Fox network, but cultivating that kind of consistency and understanding and building relationships and training people and sharing this liberation tool. Yeah, and if it starts with a banner, we're here, we're queer, we're Buddhist, fab, I'll be marching with you. She will. She's got a dress perfect for that. But yeah, good to have this conversation.
She's always eager to volunteer me for things.
Well, she said she came out of retirement, so there you go. Yes?
I was thinking about this from a personal perspective and the challenges in my life. And often to take the right action, you have to see things clearly. Seeing things about yourself and see things about the way things work and other people. And when I sit here, even like meditating today, I can see like out of the 30 minutes, maybe I had 30 seconds of equilibrium and quiet. So in your daily life, you see things that happen, and you see a David reaction of fear or whatever. And then, so you pause and you say something's going on here. But then, in order to take action, finding that clarity has been really hard for me, to know what to do. To say, am I reacting from seeing things clearly, or is this a David thing? So I just wanted to hear your...
Well, I have a response.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just like to say that you can't wait for the right action to present itself before you act. I think that taking action to find do something with your sangha, just connect with your sangha, and do something collectively is more important as a tool for self-empowerment and as a tool for empowerment out in the community than waiting for me. Do I really understand what's this deeply enough, or with enough clarity?
But actions have consequences, so you really want to be careful.
But that's a wonderful, David. That's a wonderful thought. Perfection is the enemy of the good. These marches that failed because we couldn't get to a perfect state. And finally, Sister Roma, who's a very good friend, you all know, the most photographed nun in the world, trademark. Roma finally said, "God damn these twinksters. Don't they understand that being an activist means you have to go to an unsafe space?" She was smart enough not to tweet that out there, because that would have created a whole other firestorm. But, action, creates consequences, but if you're mindful, well, you're not going to get it 100% right, because then you would have already achieved nirvana and I wouldn't be talking to you. But propelling it forward, and when you're polarized, that's when you phone a friend. That's the Sangha hotline. Hey, just want to run this by you. What do you think? Sanghas that I've been in have discussion groups. They talk about issues, they plan, they think through. I know you guys do a lot of that work. Go back to what you know works. Do it, work the program, right? Work the practice. You're there. Jeff first, and then
Thank you for a very inspiring talk. It's easy to forget, for me, in the midst of grief about this whole state of things, that we've done this in some degree or another before, and we've been in training for this. But I was thinking about the hashtag flow, and flow could be confused with just being a verb, but it's really informed by silence and stillness, right? And that to me is the ultimate safe space.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't change. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for one more.
Tom, I really like your idea of having more of a political presence. I used to be involved with Quaker meetings when I lived in Chicago, and I tried out various. There were 3 or 4 Quaker meetings, and there was disagreement among people in each of the meetings about the balance between silence and political action. And there were some Quaker meetings that managed to keep that balance pretty well. There were others that, for fear of doing the wrong thing, did absolutely nothing. And they, to me, felt kind of irrelevant. And then there were Quaker meetings where the scales seemed to be tipped entirely in favor of political action, and the meeting felt as if the silence was a sort of antechamber to political action, and that everything was building up to that. And I imagine that if we try to do something, as you were suggesting, there will be disagreement in this group as well. But I must admit, I feel a little impatience with this principle of finding compassion for the pain of someone who's being a homophobe or being a racist. And Jay, this is, you know that I like you and admire you very much. But no, I'm talking to Jay. But I think that, you know, and there's a higher principle than simply being non-confrontational, and I think that higher principle is letting people know that talking in a racist way or talking in a homophobic way is simply not acceptable, even if they're getting the larger message from political climate that it's okay. That making them squirm a bit and making them feel a little uncomfortable if they start talking to me about how bad the Muslims are, or how bad... I've had this happen in my neighborhood, actually, in Santa Cruz. And I've told a neighbor, don't talk to me until you lose your racism. And in the eyes of some of the neighbors, this was really kind of crossing the line, because you were being confrontational, but that's not the highest principle. Mm-hmm. I would be very much in favor of doing something you were mentioning.
There was an exchange yesterday on CNN between a young African-American woman who was Bernie Sanders' public spokesperson and a former U.S. Senator, a white guy from the South who, I can't remember his name because that's how I feel about him. But he said something like, he said exactly what you're talking about. You know, we just have to get past all this white supremacy stuff, and we've got to learn to work together. And she lit up like a Roman candle on July 4th. And he had this Cheshire smile like, see, I just beat you, because this is really just about rhetoric. But she just kept going. And he lost, because what she said was, there's no equivalency between these two things. And you can't just tell me to step over something that's been going on for 400 years. So I'm having a little bit of a education of Miss Jane Brody right in this moment with the Brady Bunch squares, right? The left square and the right square, we're having at it. And I think different people will perceive different messages. Some people will say, yeah, see, she lost her cool, or she's uppity, right? Those people. Most people, if they have a heart, will go, yeah, what the hell was that? Yeah, this is not just a little battle of words. These are real lives. And compassion, you know, the word to suffer with. At a certain point, I'm really tired of suffering. The whole point of Buddhism is get over the suffering, right? And when you challenge people like that, what you're challenging is their attachment to something, to a privilege, to a way of being, to a way of feeling safe. And it's perfectly okay for a Buddhist to be confrontational. You need to be. I mean, self-immolating monks are not sitting there not provoking confrontation. They are out there, right? Aung San Suu Kyi is not being a tepid little wallflower and taking on a military dictatorship. You've got to propel the action. The thing is, are you doing it with the breath? Are you doing it with each other? Are you doing it with that intention? Because the thing that's hard to, I work with a lot of young trans activists right now, and the hardest thing to help them understand is they've grown up in this safe space idea, which I don't want to shame that. There's a reason for that. But right now, there is a whole engine of commercial and social and political forces that are brazen. They don't care if it's false. They don't care if it's contradictory. They don't care if it hurts people. They're just selling it. So at a certain point, you do have to step over, is this the perfect platform? And just take action. So I just encourage you guys, perfection is the enemy of the good, right? But you are an engine of liberation for yourselves and each other. So liberate. Liberate. We need you now. Buddhism has never been more relevant in this country than now, when the country itself is about to teeter off into a dictatorship. Act compassionately, love each other. Do what you have been doing as a gay Buddhist fellowship for so long, and take it out there so people see you.
Yeah, your point, Shantanu, that starting to do things will engender disagreement maybe in the group. My feeling is the disagreement is there. It's providing an opportunity to bring it out and to deal with it, and face it.
I think it's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And people who don't want to have more of a political presence need not get involved.
That's right. Yeah, even in Buddhism,
we can still meditate together.
Self-care is sexy, even for Buddhists. Yeah. So.
And on that note,
thank you, Rob. Thank you, everybody.
You have to come back again soon. Okay. Our speaker next week is Eve Decker. Eve Decker began practicing Vipassana meditation in '91. She has been teaching Dharma since 2006. She's released CDs of original Dharma-based music and is a graduate of the Path of Engagement and Community Dharma Leader Training Programs at Spirit Rock in California. So she will be our speaker. If you've never experienced her here, it's a very lovely morning with her. Please come. Next is Donna. Donna is the Pali word for giving, and our host will be passing around a Dana bowl. The suggested donation is $10, but whatever you can freely give is greatly appreciated. It does go for rent, for our speakers, the newsletter that we do every month, the Larkin Street dinners, and any other mailers and things that the Sangha provides for community. And if I may, our host.
I'm David. I'm the host today, so if you want to find a place to give your $10, just look for me. I'm there. There's also a sign-up sheet, and so far we haven't used it as a political action list. However, there's hot water, hopefully it's heated up, and you can use it for tea, and then just put your cups in the sink, and I will take care of them. And some of us meet at 12:30 at the front to go to lunch, and so check it out.
Thank you. On the credenza, these beautiful pamphlets for the GBF retreat that's happening in October. Tom, can you fill us in?
Yes, it's the last weekend in October. It'll be at Vajrapani, as we've been many, many times. Registration's open. There's a form in there. It's only by mail, so you can get one of the pamphlets that has the registration form. That same pamphlet is also on our website if you just want to print it out at home and mail that off to Jerry Jones. So we hope you can join us. It's always wonderful.
Yeah, I was away from the Sangha for a long time, in Bali, and now I'm coming back full time. And the last 4 times I've been here, nobody's gone to lunch, and I used to love going to lunch after the meeting. So if anyone's so inclined, let's do it.
Thank you.
Could I go to lunch?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm already out for lunch.
And it's been working for you for 40 years. Don't screw it up now.
Okay, I have flyers here. You've heard me say this before. The San Francisco Choral Society is giving concerts at Davies Hall this Friday and Saturday at 8 o'clock. Mendelssohn's Elijah. It's a massive, gorgeous piece of music, somewhat about a culture trying to defend itself against alien influence. Wicked sexpot Jezebel from Phoenicia has corrupted her husband and has brought in the priest of Baal, and Elijah drives them out. And it's full of, there's a slightly kitschy element. It's show busy, it's gorgeous. It's like the best movie score you've ever heard if you've ever been moved by music. It's operatic, and we're going to sing it really well. The solos are terrific, and it's the cheapest concert dollar in the city. The orchestra is only like $34. If you're willing to open yourself to a torrent of gorgeous music, and it's in English, so you know what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah, go to Elijah. Go to Elijah on Friday, and Saturday come to Project Nunway, which is at Soma Arts. It's a fashion show and fundraiser for a transgender youth organization, I believe, this year. So Yeah, thesisters.org. You can get the information.
It's a torrent of operatic costuming, where a Phoenician Jezebel has come in and taken over the priesthood.
If you had only seen Mary Peter all in balloons in years past.
Anyone else? Okay, please.
I'd just like to donate back my speaker fee to the Sangha today as a seed for manifesting publicly. So take that money and think about what you're going to do with it to make yourselves known. Okay?
We do have a banner somewhere.
We can get it.
I want a t-shirt.
I want a t-shirt. Okay, dedication of merit.
Cass, you're molting. Oh. It's that season.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.